It was definitely a transition I didn't see coming. So it was never in my plans, to be a pastor. Never, even in Bible college, thought about, oh yeah, one day I think I'm going to pastor. That never crossed my mind. In fact, I probably crossed my mind that I didn't want to be a pastor.
Hi there. Welcome back to the Christian Leader Made Simple podcast. I'm Ryan Franklin, and I would love for you to join me every week as we explore leadership topics that'll help you get the clarity needed to move your church or organization forward. You can hit the subscribe button and the bell to get notified as soon as I post a new session. And before we get started, I do want to mention that I have a great product called the Christian Leader Blueprint. It's a solid model for leadership development to help you establish a better rhythm of life, to see yourself more clearly, to leverage your strengths, and to build more productive relationships. And I want to give it to you as my free gift. You can go to ryanfranklin.org and you can download the short guide for free today. And without any further delay, let's get to our session. I'm excited today to have on the podcast a great friend of mine, Brandon Cowden. So let me tell you a little bit about Brandon. At the age of 13, he started playing piano for his childhood church in Kentucky. And out of high school, Brandon went to Indiana Bible College for several years and then started his first music ministry job at Life Tabernacle in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And through a series of transitions, he landed in Atlanta, Georgia as the music minister at Atlanta West Pentecostal Church. And Brandon has had the honor of playing music at NAYC and General Conference and many other conferences all over the United States. He's also been involved in several gospel records, including with James Wilson and Draylen Young. And his latest move was a little bit different. He and his wife, Kanisha, and his 3 boys made a move back across the United States to the Dallas-Fort Worth area once again, where he had his first music minister job out of college. But this time, it was a little bit different. It was to become a senior pastor, the senior pastor of Life Church. And so, Brandon, welcome to the Christian Leader Made Simple podcast.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're here today to have a little conversation about your transition from music minister to senior pastor. That's a rare transition. But many people, for one, are having transitions just, from assistant pastor to pastor or various transitions. But there may be some music ministers out there that are even struggling with their calling and what's next for them. And so let's just start off by, if you don't mind, telling us a bit of an overview of the story of your transition, where you were logistically and emotionally during this time when you started grappling with this, and then where you are now.
Yeah, absolutely. It was definitely a transition I didn't see coming. So it was never in my plans, to be a pastor. Never, even in Bible college, thought about, oh yeah, one day I think I'm going to pastor. That never crossed my mind. In fact, I probably crossed my mind that I didn't want to be a pastor. So it was definitely an interesting transition as I was at Atlanta West Pentecostal Church as the music minister there. And even transitioning to there, I did feel there was something in my ministry that was changing or shifting, but I didn't know what that was. I was just like, God, well, I'm just going to continue doing what I'm doing and we'll see where this goes. And I remember sharing that when I first came to Atlanta West with Pastor Johnson. And so, he was just going to pray with me about it and kind of see where it went. And so in that transition, I remember getting the call from the pastor in Texas, and it was just really random. I hadn't talked to him probably in 2 or 3 years. The week before he called me, I remember telling my wife, I come home from work, she was home from work, and we were standing in the living room there, and I was saying, babe, what would you think about, if God called us to pastor somewhere, And she was like, the first thing she said, why are you saying that? Why are you even talking like that? And I remember I said, I don't know. I said, I said, but if God did call us a pastor, I feel like it would be, a church like Life Tabernacle, where I was once a music minister. It was just something about that church, something about that area. And, I always loved that place. And so if it were going to happen, it probably won't. But if it were, it would be like a church like that, and so I remember, and I remember my wife had told me, she reminded me that I had said that before too, another time. And a week later, the pastor of Life Church in Texas called me, and
Wow.
and he asked me, he said, what would you think about, have you ever thought about pastoring? And I remember I was at the church at Atlanta West, and I remember I looked up like at God, like, are you listening to me? You screening my calls right now? And I remember, just like, this is not happening. That was the first, this is not real. There's no way this is happening. And I remember he asked me, and I said, I don't know. I know what I had
no
said
good answer, huh?
Yeah. I know what I said a week ago, but now that you're calling me, I don't know. And
Yeah.
but I told him, I said,
because you were comfortable in Atlanta.
Oh, absolutely.
You loved it.
Loved Atlanta. I loved the city. I love living there. I wanted to, move south, and so it was great. And I was like, oh man, God, this is the place, And so it was an interesting phone call I got, and that kind of kicked off this transition. And I remember just after that call, just being like, what am I going to do now? Like, where do I go from here? And
Yeah.
it was scary. It was just this it kind of excitement too, the possibility, but more scared than excitement, And I remember I told my wife, and she was like, no, that did not happen. There's no way that like, yes, it did. And that's what kicked off the transition. That's what kind of got things going.
So Brandon, backing up just a bit in some of the, I guess the beginning signs, you alluded to it a little bit. Obviously there was a God thing involved in that. That wasn't coincidental that you felt that, and had that conversation with Kanisha, and then got the phone call a week later. Were there any other beginning signs that, maybe an emotion or, sort of a mental shift or whatever that was kind of telling you that maybe it's time to start looking in that direction?
Honestly, I don't think there was anything that I felt like looking in that direction, like as far as pastoring. I definitely felt like this call, kind of more of preaching ministry, and and I did had the opportunity to preach a few times at Atlanta West, and I do remember feeling like, oh man, this might be it. I was thinking like, oh, this is it, God. I'm just supposed to preach every now and again. I'm just supposed to minister, every now and again. And still do what I'm doing, still be a music minister.
Because that's comfortable.
That's comfortable, and I love my job. I love being at Atlanta West. I love the church, the people, the pastor. I mean, it was an amazing place to be. And so in my mind, I thought, after I preached, at Atlanta West, the first time, I thought, I think this might be it, and our pastoral staff were doing devotionals. Every month we would record a devotional for just, our online YouTube or Instagram. And so I thought, man, this is fulfilling. I think this is it. So in my mind, I thought, yeah, this is what it is. It made sense.
Yeah. So Brandon, you started filling this call and got the phone call, and you're at a great church. Had only been there, I think, 2.5 years at Atlanta West?
Yes.
And so you're having to now, 2.5 years later, which is not really a long time at Atlanta West, but you're at a great church with a fantastic pastor, Pastor Daryl Johns, And now you're having to tell him what you're feeling inside and the call that you just got, and you're having to have this initial conversation. Tell us what that was like to have the initial conversation with Pastor Johns.
Man, I'll tell you, it was a whirlwind, and I remember, getting that call and saying, let me pray about it, and so I went home, told my wife, and we prayed, and we were praying about it, and there were many times, and not just before I talked to Pastor Johns initially, but many times throughout the transition where I said, no, this is not it. I'm going to call him. I'm going to call him and tell him, no, I'm going to call him. Nope, I'm not going to be a pastor, And so during this time, I think before I talked to Pastor Johns, I think it was a week or two that went by. And in those, that week or two, back and forth. I shouldn't talk to him. I haven't been here long enough. I've only been here 2.5 years. What is he going to say?
What was Kanisha going through during this time? So you're back and forth. What was Kanisha? What was going on in her head during this time? Because I know you were having conversations with her.
Yes, Kanisha is. I'm just going to say more spiritual than I am. she was like, well, babe, you spoke it. You spoke it. So I just feel, and I think she was already kind of like transitioning, in her mind. She's like, oh yeah, well this is the next thing, I think she had, I think I created doubt in her mind, I think she was already on board, like ready to go, I think she had, because of what I had said, it was a sign to her, but to me, I was like, that's not a good enough sign. Although it's, it was kind of miraculous,
You need some more fleecing of the Lord, right?
Yes. I needed all the fleecing every day. And so for 2 weeks, I believe it was like we had a Sunday or 2 Sundays in between. And one of those Sundays, Josh Herring preached. And he preached about aligning with your assignment. And in that message, wow. I remember, we had 2 services at Atlanta West, back-to-back services, basically mirror services. And so in that first service, I remember my family had come. They usually would come to the second one, but my wife had come a little early, and she caught kind of the end of his sermon, and she was like, "Well, I want to hear that again, and because I think she had come right in during the preaching in the first service, and normally, like we would, with the kids, had to get them down or whatever, but this time she was like, I'm gonna put the kids back in Sunday school, and I want to stay for this second service and hear the whole thing again, and in that second service, we just felt the Lord, and I remember we were praying. I was at the piano. And we didn't. I was sitting there waiting for that, moment where he wants you to start playing or whatever. But we never got there. It was just a great altar call. And I remember my wife coming up and praying with me, and just in that sermon. And Brother Josh Herring came over and laid hands on us, and he's like telling us, hey, there's something coming. There's going to be an opening where, you're not going to have to open the door. It's already set, and this is, and he starts saying stuff like this to us. We're bawling, we're crying. And it was at that moment.
You knew exactly what it was.
I knew exactly. I said, I got to talk to Pastor Johns this week.
Yeah.
And so that really kind of solidified my decision to talk to him. Because I remember even on that Sunday thinking after church, I'm going to call the pastor there and tell him I'm not going to do it. And I remember thinking that, like, I'm just going to tell him I can't do this, I don't, and I know I didn't want to talk to Pastor Johns. I was afraid to talk to Pastor Johns first, because I'm like, man, they've been so good to me. I've been here 2.5 years, and now I'm like going to tell them, hey, I might be going, I might be, transitioning. I might be looking at it. And that's always kind of an awkward deal for a music minister. No matter how long you've been somewhere, to bring that conversation to the forefront. And I was super afraid to do that, because I didn't know how he was going to react. I didn't know if it was going to change the relationship we had, a personal relationship, working relationship. So I was very nervous. You had a close
relationship with him. You loved Brother Johns, and still do to this day. He is your pastor even to this day, correct?
That's right. Absolutely. And just, his family, the pastoral staff there, I had grown really close to everyone and I felt like I found a place, found my place there. But after that service, I said, man, and my wife, she looked at me and I said, I know I'm going to talk to him this week, And so that really solidified it for me. Like, I have to do this, but it was a struggle getting to that point, but I did. I was able to have that meeting that week.
And so you go in, you have the conversation. What was his reaction?
I tell you, even walking into that meeting, I can still remember how it felt. I'm sitting down and, he's sitting across from me on the desk there. And, I said, I started telling the story. I said, Pastor Johns, I used to work at this church in Texas, and I had preached there I think it was maybe a year prior to, us having this conversation, or a year or two. I can't remember exactly, but I told him about it, and I told him, my connection there. And then I told him about the phone call, and that's where I got really nervous. I said, hey, this happened. And I told him how, a week prior that I had said something, to Kenesha about, being pastor there, or a church like that church, and I remember he looked at me and the first thing he said was, I just want to thank you for feeling safe and feeling comfortable enough to have this conversation with me. And I remember just that's the first thing he said. And it completely put me at ease. And I remember I was thinking, like, no, thank you for saying that, thank you so much for, not freaking out, he told me, he said, I feel like there's a spiritual element to this because of, the conversation you had a week prior and then receiving this phone call. And I remember him just saying, I think I think this is something worth pursuing. I think this is something, worth, let's pray together and let's continue going toward it, and so he kind of initiated me, setting up a time to go out there and preach and kind of feel it out, and for our family to feel it out. And he asked me to pursue that. And I remember one thing he really, he told me, he said, being a pastor, it's different. He said that it's a different kind of, it's a different weight, of ministry. And he said, I want you to know that you're built to be a pastor. Before you accept anything, or he said, I really want you to know. And he told me, he said,
wow,
I've got a dog in the fight. Yeah. He told me, he said, I got a dog in the fight here. And I don't know that I can be, unbiased in this situation. He said, I don't want you to leave. Yeah. Obviously, I love you. And so then that's when he introduced me to you and kind of gotten, ministry coaching started. And he said, I want you to do this because I want you to know that you're built for pastoring. And that was his main concern. Wow. Was that, are you called to pastor? He said, many people can minister and evangelize and but pastoring is a different ministry. It's a different weight, right. And you have to be ready for that. And I remember him just stressing that to me.
I love the fact, Brandon, that if you don't mind me butting in here, I just love the fact that he was wise enough to, of course, spiritual always trumps the physical. I mean, we're going to listen to God and we're going to obey God, even if it doesn't feel good and feel natural. Yet he was wise enough to explore those natural elements of your giftings as well. And I love that. I love that.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, he's just an amazing leader. And just his response in itself, I felt so comfortable. I felt extremely safe, in his ministry. And I think that's one of the things I could always describe his ministry. And people ask me, what is it like at Atlanta West? It's so safe. You just feel safe under his ministry. And that to me was, it was amazing, man. That weight of like being scared that our relationship is going to change and what happens now, how is, we're going to be treated differently now, is this going to feel weird at church now? But he was so wise in it and in that wisdom. And everything he asked me to do, I said, I'm going to do it. I trust him. And it was, that was an amazing experience for me in itself, just that conversation. And I think it was another
taught you a
affirmation,
lot, didn't it?
Yes. And I think it was another affirmation of, I need to continue this, because that was one of the things I told Kanisha. I said, if Pastor John says, hey, this is not the road for you, or I don't think this is it, or man, if he said anything negative, I think I would have said, I'm going to call the pastor, tell him I'm not coming.
You'd have been happy for him to say something negative.
I part of me kind of wanted it to happen,
Yeah.
just to be like, okay, this door's closed. I know it's closed, because leaving it open is still this unknown, it's still this unknown of, am I really going to do this,
So even after having this conversation, we initiated conversations with executive coaching and started moving into that. We did an assessment on you, a high-powered assessment on you that kind of zeroed in on your strengths and your weaknesses, but what do you think brought you to the place that you really knew it's time to say yes, it's time to make that transition? Or was that kind of a gradual? Was there a moment, or was that kind of a gradual?
Honestly, it was extremely gradual. There was a moment, but I'll tell you when it happened. It was, the moment hit me when I was voted in as pastor.
Wow.
I think that was the real moment where I said, okay, I am definitely supposed to go. I was voted in 98% in as senior pastor there.
Which in this day and age, to get 98% is huge, because this day and age, it's rare that you would get 100%. If you get 90%, you're doing really, really well, but 98 is strong. So that was kind of the sign that it's time.
It was. And I remember, and throughout this time, I mean, this was a process of probably 6, 7, 8 months, somewhere in there. And throughout this entire process, throughout the coaching, there were always moments where I was like, I'm going to call the pastor and tell him I'm not coming. I'm going to tell him this, I can't do this, this, I'm not a pastor. I'm not built for this,
Brandon, what do you think that was that kept, sort of stirring those mental struggles within you? What do you think caused you to constantly second guess that?
I think there are a few things that kind of stood out to me that I feel like created that doubt. First off, just being a pastor, just knowing the weight of it, knowing what I've seen. I've worked in ministry for years at this point, and I've seen what pastors do, what pastors go through, and then the where it's a little different as a pastor, because people, can put you up on a pedestal. They can, think you're, this person, but you're a human being, you're going to have that humanity show.
Right.
And that's a tough thing, for pastors. And I tell, when I was kind of mentoring some other music ministers, I say, listen, one of the hardest things is when you see the humanity of pastors and they're human, and you know that they're going to make mistakes, or say something to upset you, or, sometimes you feel that betrayal, and all of that, those things can happen as a pastor. And I was like, man, I don't want to be in that position. And then the other side of me was, there are a lot of people that, when I was in Bible college, they want to be pastors, they want to, they're looking for an opportunity that had just presented itself to me. And it almost felt like a betrayal to them, like,
this isn't fair.
How is this happening to me, And I'm not even like, when people, I'd say something about being a pastor, even now they're like, oh, you're a pastor? You went to be pastor? You're a music minister, and so it felt like, man, am I taking an opportunity from someone else? And so, those two things. Wow. And then the last one, I think, for me was, I just didn't think I could do it. I didn't think I could be successful at it.
Just a self-doubt, maybe a fear of failure.
100% fear of failure. And I think in those, in our coaching sessions, one of the things that, I constantly got affirmations, in those sessions, and learning about myself, learning who I am, what makes up Brandon Cowden, what derails me, what kind of things fill me up, what energizes me, and understanding that fear of failure, was a huge part of this, because I'm not going to, a church of, 500, you know what I mean? The church had been through a lot through COVID and seen a lot of changes, and it's kind of in this rebuilding process. And that's why, the pastor there wanted to bring somebody in to kind of take it. But then there's this fear of like, what if I get there and everybody leaves, and what does that happen? What does that mean for my family?
What if they don't like me?
Right. Yeah. And then I tell you, one of the biggest things was, if I fail as a pastor, do I go back to being a music minister? And what does that look like? Do I call, Pastor John and say, hey, this didn't work out. Can I come back? And what does that feel like? That, because that failure would just devastate me, like, I don't know. So that was a huge, huge fear of mine. And just knowing who I was and not feeling equipped either, So all of that.
What do you think was instrumental in helping you overcome that fear and actually, making the move at that point? What do you think was instrumental?
So the people in my life, the mentors in my life, that was the most instrumental part of it. I think
that's good.
Taking those coaching sessions, our coaching sessions were a huge part. And I say to this day that I wouldn't be a pastor if we hadn't gone through that. And I remember after like our first session or maybe second.
You've never told me that, Brandon. That makes my day.
Absolutely. 100%. I would not be pastoring if it wasn't for your coaching, for sure. And I remember
you so much.
Absolutely. I remember I think it was the second session we had after we took the CDR, and you told me, I think we're on a phone call, actually. You just called me to kind of go over it, and you told me, at the end of the call, Brandon, you're built to be a senior pastor. And I remember you telling me that. And I remember in that moment, it was another confirmation, right? Like, okay, I think I'm supposed to be doing this. I think I'm on the right path, And I remember
you had the makeup that was perfect for a senior pastor. In fact, much more so than a minister of music. You had the makeup to be a senior pastor.
And I think those things like spoke to me when you showed me that, and looking at it and kind of looking at my life and saying, oh man, I think this might be what I'm supposed to be doing. And also, helped me to, when I talk to Pastor Johns, because, his things were, are you built for pastoring? Are you built to be a pastor? And and when I got those results, it was like, oh yeah, I'm built for pastoring. Like, this is what I'm, my makeup is. This is who I am. That was a huge part of it. Huge part of coming to this place where I'm going to say yes. I'm going to go. And I think another mentor of mine, Brother Larry Silliman, I talked to him, and I remember him saying, I just feel right about this, Brandon. I feel good about this. He said, I'm so excited about it. I feel like it's happening to me, And he was just really, really excited about it. For it. And he said, I think you need to pursue this. I think you need to do this. And again, it was like, okay, God, okay. Because I feel like every other week, I'm thinking, I'm going to call him and tell him I'm not coming, and,
but so it was through relationships. It was through important relationships in your life that you sort of gained the energy to really face what you felt the Lord was calling you to do. I love that. That's tremendous. And I'm glad you brought that out. Relationships are so vital, so important to our ministries and our lives. And a lot of times as pastors, I would imagine even as music ministers, it's easy to sort of seclude ourselves, and we find ourselves surrounded by people, yet lonely and not receiving the things that we need. but you reached out and you were able to receive the things that you needed in those moments to give you the confidence to move forward in what the Lord was calling you to do. So that's tremendous. So you and your wife, you knew it was right. You made the decision. You were voted in, and logistically and emotionally, you're having to move across the nation. Say goodbye to one church. Say hello to the next church. What was that like? What types of emotions did you experience in those moments, and even the physical part of just moving? That was I was with you through that, not in your presence, but we had meetings and things of that nature through that, and I know it was a tough time for you. So kind of talk to that.
So it was, it was an exciting time. Me and my wife were both excited for the move. And it seemed like things were kind of going, in place. And before I tell you about this, I'll back up and tell you a couple of things that will kind of let you see what's going on here. So when I was in Louisville, Kentucky, for a number of years, we bought a house, had a son. After we had a son, we were transitioning out of Louisville. After we bought a house, maybe, I don't know, I had the house for maybe, it was less than a year. So I'm moving less than a year, selling a house, we had a son, and then my wife was pregnant. So we moved from Louisville to Atlanta in that transition. It was a very difficult transition. Then my wife had to get licensed in Georgia, and that took a while. She didn't have a job for a while. She's a licensed
counselor.
She's a licensed marriage and family therapist. So we're transitioning, we're moving. We had saved up some money, and so we're like, okay, I think we're going to be good. Until you get a job, we'll be okay. We got to sell the house. So we thought the house was going to sell. God's going to just open a door. We're going to have a great sale of the house. Everything's going to be great. Well, the house did not sell. And we had house mortgage payment and rent on a house for about, I think, 6 months. It was debilitating. It was just, oh man, it was horrible. We just felt like, Kanisha wasn't working. We're paying, basically double mortgage, and we're just seeing our savings just like diminish, right?
That's tough.
And so it was, and in that, she was pregnant as well. So we're getting ready to have another son. And so all this is happening. So anyway, we finally get the house sold there, and, we're good to go. So we have our next son, and finally things, she's got a job now. So I think things are, they're good. And so now we come to this next transition. Well, we had just bought the house we were renting. Okay. So we bought another house. And we were pregnant with another son. So here we are, same boat, bought a house, and got another baby on the way. And then my wife is working, and she's trying to transition her job, and transfer to a job in Texas. Well, that seemed to work out. We had a plan, had the job, everything's good to go. So we had based all our move based off of when she needed to transfer. And so we did that, and then I think maybe 2 weeks before we were supposed to go, her job let her know that job was not going to be able to transfer. And so we're in a place where we're like, oh, not again, here we are, we got a house, you don't have a job, we're transitioning, and it's completely different. So, and I'm very like, I'm having to preach, and I'm not having, never had to preach weekly, so I'm like, I'm going to have to, this is a completely different workflow for me. And so
music was easy for you. Preaching is new and a little bit more challenging to prepare for.
Absolutely. The study, the writing, all of that. And I wasn't, used to that. And so here I am trying to figure that part out. My wife's pregnant. We got 2 boys now. So we have to go on, and the move is set. So we got our pods ready. Everything is set. So we have to keep going. And so we get to moving. Thank God the house sold pretty much immediately. And so that was a blessing in Georgia. So I was nervous about that, but God worked it out. We sold the house. It was great. So the house sold, but now we're transitioning. And now we're trying to figure out this transfer for her job. And so before she quit the job she had here, she just kept working. So now I'm in Texas. We have our stuff, and we had bought a house. We found a house, and that was super stressful. The market was extremely hot here. So we're, getting outbid left and right. We finally find this house. And so we get it, and we're supposed to be closing on this house. Well, if Kenesha doesn't have this job, we're not closing on this house,
Oh, my goodness.
Because, it was based on both of our incomes. And so if it was going to be just mine, we're going to have to restructure. So we're going to have to get out of this house and lose about $5,000, plus all of the stress of starting over. And so right now we're staying we're living at this time with the pastor, and it was a nice setup. They let us stay in kind of a loft area. It's basically like a 1-bedroom apartment. So we have a bedroom, bathroom, and living room, and the boys are with me. So, it was great, space to live, but it was still very stressful because the boys don't have their rooms. Right. And here we are trying to make it work, and they're not in daycare right now. And my wife is traveling back and forth from Georgia to Texas, working through the week, coming home on the weekends. And that was 2.5 weeks we did that. And that 2.5 weeks, I can't tell you how stressful those 2.5 weeks were. I'm watching the boys all day. I'm trying to study and preach on Wednesday, on Sunday. We're trying to figure out this house, and we got down to the week of closing, and we're supposed to close on a Monday, and I asked them if we could push back till Friday, and they agreed, but Friday was it. And the week we're closing, my wife is still trying to figure out this transfer, that the people are working on it, and she gets a letter saying that, sorry, the job is canceled. You're not gonna get this job. So she calls me. She says, hey, I'm not getting this job. And I say, all right, well, we're going to have to, figure out the house situation. So we're thinking we're going to have to lose this money and figure something else out. 15 minutes later, she gets a call and says, hey, hold on a second. we're working on something. And then like 5 minutes later, they give her the job. So this is on a Monday.
Oh, my goodness.
She's in Georgia.
What a roller coaster of emotion.
Yeah, it's all over the place. She's in Georgia on a Monday. She starts on a Wednesday. Okay, so she has to get in on Wednesday. The closing was supposed to be Friday, but they had to push it back because of bad weather. So she drives. She drives in. It's 11 hours drive. So she drives in, gets in at 2 a.m. We close in the house at 6 a.m. She has to be at work at 8 a.m. Okay. So this Wednesday was, just all the emotions you could imagine. But, at the same time, it was a miracle. God had just worked it out. I tell people all the time, he's an on-time God, but I wouldn't mind if he was a little early every now and again.
Yeah.
But it was
extremely stressful time, especially those 2 weeks. But even, I remember talking to you, Brandon. It was not just the 2 weeks. It was months of very stressful transition. Lots of new things, learning new people, learning new roles. All of those things. Very, very stressful time for you. What do you feel were most important to help you through the coping through those extremely stressful and tiring times?
Number one, relationship. Kenesha and I, we talked a lot through that time, and we, with her being in Georgia, and when she would come home on the weekends, we one of the things we often say to people going through transition or just any kind of, stressful time is right now isn't always. And that's kind of what we live by. Right now is not always.
It's a season.
So it's a season. And I know for me, having, her and just focusing on our relationship, focusing on my children, my boys, just loving them, spend a lot of time with them. That time, obviously, they weren't in daycare, so we would try to go to the park every day, and just spend time, and that would help with the stress of it all, right? It was a lot of newness there, but those were the consistent things in my life, were the relationships, our relationship, having this time of coaching through that. And in those sessions, I understood a lot more about myself. And I understood, what things were, going to derail me, what I feel and how I get into my negative habits when I'm stressed, when I don't have a solid rhythm of life. And so through that transition, learning those things for me were instrumental in making this work. Even after we finally got in the house and things started settling down, understanding that, just having good sleep patterns, having a good rhythm of life, understanding, to structure my day, it changed my life. Honestly, it changed how I deal with stress. Understanding that I know this is a season and that I can get back to that rhythm of life, even after things change, and so to me, through that stressful time, it was all about relationships and not looking toward, pseudo relationships, not looking for other things to kind of fill the space,
Netflix or
other
other things to kind of cope with the stress. You engaged with relationships with particular people in your life and multiple people in your life, not just one, not just me, but multiple people in your life to fill you up and the things that were draining you. The solution to that was, one, your relationship with God. I know you have a strong relationship with God, but then two, your relationship with others. That was a vital thing.
Absolutely.
And getting back to that rhythm of life. That was a big part of getting you through that. Anything else?
Yeah, I mean, really, those are the main things, the things that stand out to me, the things I remember, and of course, obviously my relationship with Pastor John's, he was, I mean, amazing through the entire transition. I would just get, text message, I'm praying for you, praying for God's will for you and Kenesha, praying for you guys. And it's the whole pastoral staff there at Atlanta West and everybody, all the people at Atlanta West, made our transition so much more bearable, so much easier, just a smooth transition. And I don't know what I would have done without, the backing of them, and through that transition. But to me, it was all about that, getting through that transition. It was all about the relationships I had. And that's how we made it,
Well, that's excellent perspective. So, Brandon, you took an existing church where there was a well-established, long-standing pastor, and you had a great experience, from my viewpoint, a great experience with transition. What do you feel what were the components of that made it such a good experience?
I think, in any transition, clarity, understanding, communication is huge. That's going to be what's most important, I think, in any transition. I've had some good transitions. I've had some not so good transitions. But when both parties understand each other, communicate well, that's
Very
the key
clear.
To me. Very clear communication.
And even written. You had written communication,
Yes.
Correct?
Absolutely. Yes. Written communication, having the hard conversations, before we decided, yes, we had some tough conversations, some conversations about, the practicality of everything, right? What does that look like for us? How is this going to affect our livelihood? What are the expectations, from the one side, and what are our expectations of, the pastor that was there already? How is this transition going to flow? What are you looking for me to do? Is this going to be something where, I'm going to take over right away, or I'm going to gradually take over? How is that going to look? And the pastor there was amazing, and bishop now, and he's still amazing, still at the church and still working with me. But because of how well he communicated, also how him and his wife, his family, they welcomed us, and it made it very easy to transition and to start doing. And he was ready. I think that's a big part of it, some people aren't ready for that transition, even though they may
he
say
actually
they are.
released the control. He actually, allowed you to step in as pastor, make decisions, and didn't try to renegotiate and try to nudge his way back into the decision making of the church.
Yes,
Correct.
correct, exactly. And also, when we talked about transitioning, we talked about coming there and being there for about a year, and then we
Mm-hmm.
would transition to senior pastor. But one thing he did that
Yeah.
was really wise and made me very comfortable is that when I got voted in as pastor, I was automatically going to become senior pastor at a
Mm-hmm.
set date within the year, and
Yeah.
that set date was in October, and so I
So it
knew.
wasn't maybe 2 or 3 years from now, or
Yes,
maybe a year from now. It was a set
yes,
date. Before
yes,
you
and it was.
moved, you had a set date.
And when they voted on that, and so the church knew that this was going to happen. I'm going to be pastor,
Yeah.
and I'm going to be senior pastor at this set date, and there's no going back. This is it.
Yeah.
So that was clear communication from him, and I think very wise in a transition like this. I think can get very messy, and there's horror stories out there when you bring a new person in, a new pastor, and things start going well, then senior pastor's like, hey, this is going pretty good. Why don't we just keep this going,
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I didn't have that fear of that. And also, from the district, our district superintendent, Brother Flowers, I had spoken with him about the transition, and he had spoken with, Pastor Corner about the transition, and they were on the same page of what was going to happen, how the transition was going. And it was a blessing because he had just went through a similar transition at his church. Where his son became the pastor and he became bishop there. And so he put me at ease, very much so. And then as well as Brother
Yeah.
Pastor Johns knew Brother Flowers. And when I told,
Yeah.
Pastor Johns about my conversation with Brother Flowers, I think that solidified it for him. He said, okay, you're going to be pastor there. And that was
Lots
amazing.
of good communication, wise counsel, but lots of good communication between everybody. It sounds like is what facilitated that. So,
Yes.
do you think was there anything that you wish you could have done differently if you had it to do over again? Was there anything about that you wish you could have done differently that maybe our listeners could glean from?
I thought about that. I thought about what would I have done differently, if anything. And honestly, in the transition, I think that everything was done so well. I don't know that there's anything we could do as far as that is concerned differently. I mean, if there was anything I would change about the transition, probably. And I don't know that I could really, because trying to connect with people sooner.
Yeah.
But my family was my priority, and so I don't even know that I had it.
You just
to
couldn't.
do.
You couldn't.
Yes.
That's
pregnant
a
wife, 2
process
boys.
of kind of moving into that. Yeah.
So, looking back, I just think that the way everything was handled, the way we transitioned, a big focus was my family. And
Yeah.
I believe in that, and I preach that now, to our church, that ministry comes after your family.
It's very
and I wanted
wise.
to make
Yeah.
sure that they were, they were good. And even when I first got here, I remember, I was excited. I wanted to change things. I wanted to, like, oh, let's do that, let's do this, And I remember I felt a check in my spirit, and I felt like I needed to just back up and just, hey, let me just look at things. Let me build relationship. And I think that came from a multitude of counselors, and Pastor John's always said there's safety in a multitude of counselors. He believed that, he lived by that. And I said, I'm going to do that as a pastor. And after talking to you, after talking to him, it felt like the right thing to do. And I feel like it was. And so I don't know that there was anything different I would have done. Definitely with the transition, everything was above board. There were literally no hiccups or things I'm like, well, what, that's not what we talked about. None of those moments happened. It was a beautiful transition. It was a beautiful, just everything about it was great. So, and the church received me well, and it was awesome.
So you're actually 1 year this month into moving back to this church. And so you've settled in after your first year as the senior pastor. You've already had the official services and all to install you as the senior pastor. So you're there.
I'm here.
This first year, what was good about it, and what was a struggle about it, and what's next, maybe even.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of great things this year. In transition, one of the things that always happens, I feel like, is with the church is, they're also in this transition, right? And, pastor there had been there 30 years. And now,
Mm-hmm.
Some of the people remember me, but I'm a completely different person than I was, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
People are curious. People are like, I wonder what he's going to be like, and there's a lot of that. And so then you have people that will leave through the transition, decide that, hey, I don't want to do this. Change is hard for people. And so that was difficult, being the pastor, it was a shift for me. And because I never desired to be a pastor, and so I'm here like, okay, God, I'm here, but I'm here for you,
Yeah.
And in that, it was hard to see people go. It was hard to see people transition out. It was that part was probably one of the most difficult things. And then just finding my new, workflow, rhythm of life in it all. Now I'm preaching. I'm not playing. That was difficult for me. I played piano every week for the last 25 years. I don't know, however long it's been, and I've never not played piano, for a service. And so the shifting of that, getting, studying and writing out a sermon, developing a thought, that's all foreign, to me, and I preach every, here and there, once a year, twice a year, but now I'm here maybe twice a week preaching. And now, so that part was very hard to kind of transition my thinking, my mind, my study, and how to set that time up and kind of getting like, because, I know if I'm playing a song, I know how much time I need to practice because I've done it for years.
Yeah.
But if I need to preach a sermon and I need to preach it on a certain topic, how long is that going to take me? Several days,
experience.
Apparently. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that was difficult. That part was hard. And losing people, transitioning, trying to build relationships, but people and knowing that people have to want to that relationship. And I wanted it, but then people, were like, no, I don't want that. And that was hard for me because I'm like, God, you brought me here to do this. Why are people not wanting this? So that part was very difficult for me, and kind of getting through that. But knowing that what helped me through that is knowing that I was supposed to be there. Like I didn't open this door. I knew without a shadow of a doubt, this is where I'm supposed to be. This is what I'm supposed to do.
God ordained. Yeah.
It was God ordained. So I knew, okay, God, I'm going to be okay with this. I know that this is going to be part of the transition. So that was what was tough for me. The good things are easy, the church, just kind of felt like it just had new life, and it was exciting. Momentum is building. People are excited. People are, making some changes, and people are like, man, that's amazing. That's awesome. And that was so exciting. And then I think this whole year, one of the most rewarding things for me, and this is a church that is not like, 4 generations deep, in Pentecost, right? We have a lot of first generation or second generation. But beyond that's it. And most of them are brand new. And so seeing people fall in love with Jesus, seeing people, build in their relationship with God and grow in their relationship with God has been the most rewarding part for me, and being a part of that journey for them. I was, there was a lady that told me
that's good.
And she'd been to church, maybe a year or so. And she told me, Pastor, I'm going to stop vaping. And I was like, praise God. You know what I mean? And it's like, it's not something that I had heard a lot because, I've been to well-established churches. And even in those churches, I didn't really work with new converts, right? I'm doing music ministry. I see people, praise the Lord, and every now and again teach a Bible study, but I'm not working with these people, and teaching them, and being able to teach them stuff they've never heard before. I did a series, and I just talked about fasting. There are people in the church, new converts that never fasted. They didn't even know what it meant. What does that mean? What do I do with that? Being a part of that journey for me has been the most exciting thing, and seeing them grow. It's so rewarding seeing them grow in their relationship with God and desire that, relationship with God. And one of the things me and Kenesha, when we said we were coming, we want to focus on relationship. We want people to know that this isn't, a mandate. You got to do this. No, we want you to have a relationship with God, and then He'll tell you what you should do. And when those people have those moments, it's amazing. Another guy, he had dreads, long dreads, and he came in one day, had his hair all cut off, right, real short. And people at the church, did you talk to him about his hair? I said, no, I didn't talk to him about his hair. Why would I do that? And it's amazing. He came to me. He said, Pastor, God told me to cut my hair off. He said, I've had this I think he had it for 7 years. He had these dreads. Wow. And he said, God told me to cut them off, and I struggled, but I knew I needed to do that. And that's what I wanted. That's what I wanted in a church. I wanted a church that was based on relationship, not rules and regulations, but relationship. Because when you have a relationship with Him, the things in your life start to change, but organically, And
so you're moving that direction. You've moved into relationship with your church and kind of settling in that. And what's next for you? What do you feel like is next on the horizon for 2023?
Yes, absolutely. This is going to be an exciting year. I'm so excited about what God is going to do this year, what He's already started. I spent this last year really doing a lot of organizing, doing a lot of building relationships. And now I feel like we're in a place where we have a new convert, somebody coming in, that doesn't know anything about God, and we have a clear path from new convert to saint, to being involved, to this. That's what I want to focus on, and that's really this year is about outreach. And now I feel like we're in a place where we can get that. When I first got here, I told our leadership team, I said, if we have 100 people show up tomorrow, we would lose them because we have no idea what we're going to do with them. They're going to come in. How do I get involved? How do I become a member? How do I grow? How do I do this? We don't have a clear path for that. And now I feel like we're in a place where we have a clear path, And my first year here, it's funny, my first Easter, we had all these guests that were supposed to be coming. I had a parking lot team. I had people parking down the street, so we had all these spaces. I put extra chairs out, and we had 0 guests, not a one show up, not one guest. So I'm in church and it's empty, man. It's probably 75, 80 people there, and I'm thinking, okay, I had my general conference message. Huh? Yeah, I had my general conference message ready to go. I was like, we're going to do this. We're going to win souls today. And not a one person came. And, but I felt from the Lord, prepare. And that's what we've been doing this year. We have been getting our teams organized. We've been getting our ministries organized. We've been getting a process organized from people, and we've seen it. We started our First Steps class where you can get involved right after you go through this class, and there's places for everybody to get involved. And now I'm seeing people that, like I said, are growing. Hey, Pastor, I'm going to quit vaping. I'm going to do this. I'm going to stop doing this. I'm going to do that. And now because they're connected to us, they have a place that they can serve. They're buying into the vision of it. And I think that's where we are this year. This year is a year of outreach for us, and we've got a lot of great events. And this last year helped me know, and I think there's a couple things that in pastoring, in looking at a church, and I'll share this with everyone. I looked at what our church does well, and our church is one of the most friendly churches you'll come to. And I'm not just saying it because I'm the pastor. I'm saying it because when I call guests, that's what they tell me. Almost every guest I've called in contact, they've all said the same thing. Man, you guys are friendly. And then our church is very diverse. We're made up of white, black, Hispanic is probably most of what we're made up of, but we have Jamaican family. We've got other, backgrounds of people, that are there. And so to me, that's the 2 points I wanted to highlight. And so I decided, okay, we're going to be friendly on purpose, and we want to show people that we are diverse and that this is a place where that is, expected, so when you see us online, when you see us on our website, you're going to see diversity. And that's what we're working on now, redoing our website, showing what makes up life and who we are. And I believe in being authentic. And some people say they're authentic, but they're constantly looking for what people are looking for. Well, I'm not looking for what people are looking for. I've decided that this is what makes up life, and it's not a church for everybody. We hope that everybody we would love to come, but we're going to be who we are because that's who we are. That we love people, we love God, we love people.
That's good.
And that's
what I love that.
That's what we're focusing on, this year. And I had to look at that and decide, like, this is what we want to do, and so that's what we're doing.
Yeah. So as we wrap up, as we bring this to a close, just one last question I want to ask you. You loved music. I would assume you still love music.
Yeah.
How are you scratching that itch now? How are you fulfilling the music side of ministry in your life now that you're a senior pastor?
Absolutely. This is a question I get the most. People ask me about being pastor, like, well, what about music, right? Because I was so involved in music, and not just, working in my local church, but I was able to travel, to do different things, to play at conferences, to play for recordings. And that was a big part of my life. And I spent, almost all my life, working on that craft, And I'll say this, and I told another friend of mine, he asked me this, and, he had feeling this calling to preach, or pastor, start a church. And I told him, I felt the Lord tell me to give him my testimony. And in the struggle of trying to figure out if I was going to come be pastor, I asked God, I said, God, what about my music? Like, what am I supposed to do now? Like, is it over? Am I done? And I mean, I spent my whole life working on this. I do love music. So what am I supposed to do? And I felt the Lord speak to me, and he said, Brandon, I am the one that has always opened the doors of music for you. And I said, you're right. I've never put myself out there. I've never called people and said, hey, I'm a music minister, or I play piano. You want me to come, And I've never done that. And God has always opened the doors. And my dad used to tell me this all the time, your gift will make room for you. And I always believed that.
Wow.
And so I lived by that. I always went through the doors that were open, And he told me, he said, I've always opened the doors for you. Why would you think I would close them now? And I felt at peace with that. And I said, okay, God. And in that, it has been tough. There's times I feel like I grieve that side of ministry. I miss it.
Yeah.
I miss putting Ableton sets together and putting worship sets together. And even my music minister at church, I've had to, I purposely back off and say, I want her to, this is your ministry. I'm not the music minister. I'm not coming in to take control. I know and I've seen it as a pastor, I don't even have the capacity to do it and pastor.
Right. You're so busy with so many other things.
It's unbelievable. No way I would be able to do that. And so making myself, and that's hard for me because I love music and I love good music. And I'm thankful we have an excellent music minister and we have great music. And so, I've had to be at peace with it, and it's been tough, but I've had people in my life to help me along the way. My friend Travis Dykes, he's a bass player, incredible bass player, travels all over. And I was with him not too long ago, and he told me it's kind of like a wave, and when you ride the wave, you got to know that wave is going to come down, but it's also going to come back up again. And I remember when he told me that, because I was struggling at that moment. I was here preaching, and the struggle is I know I'm supposed to be here, and I love preaching, I love pastoring, but I love music. And so in that struggle, there's times where I'm like, oh, man, I want to play. I want to do this, I want to go travel again. But God has closed some doors in that area of my life, and I've had to be okay with that. But then God has also opened. You've had
to grieve through that. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And I know that knowing that it's a season, it's a wave, and there's going to be times, and I know like this season has been of transition, new baby, all of that. But now I see God opening some doors in that area for me. I'm traveling
Yeah.
out this next month and February and March, going to be able to play for a couple of conferences. And so I never think that, I don't think that door is closed in my life. I don't think that part of my ministry is over. I think it's just going to look different. And that's what I'm having to deal with. That's what I'm having to work through, is that it's not going to be the same as it was.
Yeah.
But God is still going to open the doors that need to be open. And I would say this to anybody, if anybody's in that transition, okay, if you're feeling that call, make sure you don't force a door open. You know, that God is saying, hey, it's not time for this right now. Don't try to force it. Let God be the one that opens the door, and be okay when he closes the door. And that's hard to do. And I've struggled myself with that, knowing that this door closed and I could maybe do something to try to get back in that door. But I've not done that. And I know that it's for my good. God is he has a purpose for my life. And I know that he will open that door when it's time. And I know that he's not done with me in that area either. It's just going to look different. So that's how I feel about that part of my life now. And it's not, if you're still going through that, if anybody's on, listening, going through that, know that it's not over for me. There's moments I still grieve it, because I love it. But I know my purpose. I know what God has called me to do.
That's so good. Well, Brandon, this has been just a fantastic interview, and thank you so much for the conversation today and for your time. It's been such a privilege and a pleasure to have you on the podcast. And Brandon, if people want to connect with you in some way, online maybe, where can they find you?
So you can, if you want to connect with us on our church, we have a YouTube page, Life Church Watauga, and hopefully we're going to be doing some things on there for small churches, kind of like showing how we, on a budget, upgrade some systems and stuff. So if you're interested in that, you can check that out. You can, I'm on Instagram as Brandon, I think _ Cowden, or Facebook, or even I have a YouTube channel for music. If you're interested in that, Studio B Music on YouTube, you can connect with me there. But yeah,
I'll definitely put those things in the show notes so people can find you there. So be sure to connect with Brandon, especially if you are in transition and want to do it well and get some ideas. I know he would be happy to have a conversation with you. But if you're a new listener, be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts or on YouTube. And also, it would make my day if you would take a minute to rate the show. My name is Ryan Franklin. Thank you so much for listening to the Christian Leader Made Simple podcast.